Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm Senior Minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, a historically humanist congregation, and this is Coffee and Wisdom. This week, we are talking about self and other, and we're going back to the actual kind of strain of philosophy in Western philosophy, continental philosophies specifically, that deals with this question of the other. That's where it comes from, and then it has become kind of a catchphrase later on, as we will see. But we want to start really at the beginning of this. So let's go and see what we can do here. I did mention yesterday a philosophical jargon alert. The concept of the other is based in the work of Edmund Husserl. It comes from Hegel, as so many ideas do, but then Husserl picked it up in the early 20th century, and he was the founder of phenomenology, which figures fairly importantly into this particular work. So one of the ideas here, of course, is that the distinction between I, the self, and the other, and then that us and them. So how we draw distinctions around me versus everything else, and then us and them, and how we draw those boundaries. This is really the question of the other. The most important person, philosopher in this tradition is Emmanuel Levinas. He based his entire philosophical project on this idea. 1906, 1995, he was born in present-day Lithuania of secular Jewish family. He became a French citizen before the Second World War, fought in the French resistance, became a prisoner of war during that time, and later taught at the University of Paris. But we'll have to say that the Second World War, for many of his generation, was formative for him. He spoke 5 languages by the time he was out of high school. Since he was Jewish, after he was captured by the Nazis, he pretended to be Russian because he was fluent in Russian. And so he really had a background in how to be the other, in the experience of being the other. And he also did lose family in the Holocaust. So very much the idea of an us and them was mattered a lot to him. And he really wanted to figure out, how do we get past this place where we always draw all of these distinctions and these lines? So Emmanuel Levinas. A couple of his important books, Totality and Infinity, Time and the Other. Another thing that he did a lot of is his philosophy was coming out of Heidegger, but Martin Heidegger was a Nazi and never said he wasn't all the way till his death. And so Levinas was really trying to remove or back away from the ideas that were built into phenomenology by Heidegger. And so that was part of the project that was going on here. If one could possess, grasp, and know the other, it would not, sorry about my machine today, for some reason is acting up a little bit. If one could possess, grasp, and know the other, it would not be other. That is absolutely central to the ideas of Levinas. If one could possess, grasp, and know the other, it would not be other. So there is this distinction between me, you, and the world. Now, Levinas blamed self-centeredness in the Western world on Western philosophy itself, which he claimed began by drawing boundaries around the conception of the solitary individual. And this goes all the way back to the beginnings of Greek philosophy, and he says it was baked in. You can see that from this picture of his office, this guy did read a few books. He seemed to have a bit of a book problem there, but he was certainly very well versed in what he was talking about from the Western philosophical position. So this idea then is that in the Western world, we are going to be always thinking about an I as a solitary individual, and then I judge out. Most famously, Descartes, of course, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. It's all about I. There's no we think, therefore we are. No, it's I think, therefore I am. And that is Levinas's problem with Western philosophy in general. And so he claimed Westerners pursue truth rather than relationship pursue sterility, as he called it, rather than possibility. So you get the idea here is that the entire Western philosophical project and all of those religions within Western philosophy and theology are part of the problem. He said, one self simply cannot comprehend another self when thinking from a Western perspective of self. We are stuck in this dichotomy of self and other, he claimed. Levinas argued that the other cannot be othered, cannot be turned into an object without extreme damage and danger to both what we call the self and what we call the other. And again, you can see exactly where he's going to be coming from in terms of the Holocaust, certainly. But in general, he thought that human relationships were fraught and extremely dangerous because of our misunderstanding. So how are we going to get around that? And he fought all through his life in his thinking about how do we do that. I should mention another person who, this is Emmanuel Mounier, is kind of forgotten nowadays, unfortunately. He died in 1950. So even though he was very much involved in the Levinas ideas early on, he did die and now is kind of forgotten, except probably in France, leftist Roman Catholic. But he said, the universe is full of men, sexist language, going through the same motions in the same surroundings, but carrying within themselves and projecting around them universes as mutually remote as the constellations. So Mounier is thinking in exactly the same direction as Levinas, and it was very much in the air of the Paris that was recovering from the Nazi occupation of the day. So Levinas stressed that each encounter must be treated as an awesome event. Now, each encounter, I mean, every time you're walking down the sidewalk, you're supposed to have an awesome event. Every time you see a face, well, yeah, I mean, this is philosophy. But yes, that is the idea, actually, is that every face you see is an awesome thing, this wonderful constellation of meanings that we do or don't get to know, and usually don't. In that encounter, the self sees its connectedness and responsibility. The self then lives up to that awesome responsibility or not. And Levinas said this is where ethics comes from. The humanist idea of non-theological ethics comes exactly from our realization that we have to have empathy and compassion when we see the other. Or if we don't, then we have another kind of problem there. Thus, my interactions with what I perceive as other result in what I feel as accusations. So I go around feeling like I'm being accused if I am not receptive to those outside of my realm here. Accusations because I know deep down that I am totally, utterly dependent on the other. And this is the great realization, Levinas thinks, is that we must realize that we are in a vast web of mutuality, of community, and often we don't think that when we walk down the street, and therefore we feel as if we're being accused by others. You're not open to me, you're not fair to me, and then we develop this kind of shell around what we're doing. This feeling creates a subjective experiences, and what those subjective experiences then can be very painful. That other is dangerous, right? I can't go walking in downtown Minneapolis because there are so many blank people and therefore I don't feel safe. That's the idea. We are othering, and because we don't have the capacity to reach out and understand what that other face is thinking about. So you see why Levinas is so important in this consideration of the other. He spent his entire philosophical career thinking about it. But again, it's not easy philosophy to read, so you kind of have to have a bit of a background to that. So the disjunctions and feelings generated by disjunction have become the Western concept of God. This is very important, again, to Levinas. Levinas, again, was from a Jewish family. Through his life, he explores the ideas of theological ideas more and more as he goes along. So the disjunction and feelings generated by this feeling of being other it has become the Western concept of God. I am dependent upon all these other things, and that must be God. Right? Western religions teach us that we are to love others as ourselves, but those religions only do that, said Levinas, because they have the conception of other all wrong. Because Western religions and philosophies have put the other out there, away from me, not me. Then they talk about love your neighbor as yourself. But already the concept of neighbor is already messed up because of Western philosophy. We don't see the neighbor as ourselves already. And so then we can't live up to these commandments of the Western religions, which would be Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So Levinas said, faith is not a question of the existence or non-existence of God. It is believing that love without reward is valuable. Central idea for Levinas. Love without reward is valuable. I don't go around making distinctions between the deserving poor and the undeserving poor. Everybody deserves, right? A love without a reward. And that is what matters in life, not some kind of a theological idea of some kind of God. And one of my favorite of his sayings, thou shalt not kill, is the first word of the human face. A very important idea, I think. So no, we don't go killing the other because it's other. We always, every person and every face we see, we should remember a central human idea, which is thou shalt not kill. It's the first word of the human face. And that really summarizes what Levinas is talking about. So, as I started yesterday, more startups are saying goodbye to foosball tables and hello to meditation rooms. In California, it's a big thing. But what would Levinas say about that? Well, you know, do you want to get inside your head and be all about you? Or do you want to get outside your head and have a good time with foosball? Levinas would definitely say foosball is a much more religious experience than is meditation, because you will discover the other as you go along. So that's the general idea of what he is saying. Thanks a lot for listening today. Our monthly theme this month is Beloved Community. During Black History Month, we are examining the idea of expanding beloved community, one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s central ideas, and that's what we're working on here. And next Sunday, we'll be very glad to talk about that and consider it some more. And so this week, that's what we're talking about, self and other. And thanks a lot, and I'll see you again tomorrow.